So he said, I see Budya, he said, bring us a mat. As the question, just for those who are watching this particular recording that we just started a bit late, it's going to take us some time to get back into things. The question was asked by the Sabid Be'atuna to Rabbi Shua ben Hanania, show us a vessel, a kli, that isn't itself worth the damage that it can cause. And so I see Budya, he said, bring a mat. Pshatuhu, they brought it, and they spread it out. And it was in front of some kind of gate. They could not bring the mat through the gate. Says Rashi, Budya is machzelas, as a mat, because it was wider and it was longer than the actual archway. And so they couldn't fit it through. They spread this thing out. It was too wide, it was too long, it wasn't fitting. So Amrluhu, so they said, well, we want to get the mat through the gate. Presumably, they wanted to get it through the gate when it was spread out. Right? Obviously, they could have just folded it up, but it was spread out. They wanted to pull it through the gate. They said, "How are you going to? The gate is not wide enough." Asiyamara, bring an axe. They brought an axe, Sisera, and they destroyed the whole gate. He said, "Good." He said, "This is a tool. This is something, a vessel, an item that isn't worth the damage that it caused, because this is just a little mat." And now, because you had a technical issue of how to move this mat from place to place, you had to destroy a whole archway. Okay, obviously, all these things have deeper meanings, some of which we're going to discover. But this is what he answered him. Hainu mana de lo shavi l'chabal. Now, there's another Gemara, which is actually a Mishnah in Saita Daf Mem Ches, that says, Mishacharav Beis HaMikdash, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Batal HaShamir, the Shamir, which was this mystical kind of worm that was used to carve out the chayshen, to carve out different stones, to carve out all the different implementations to cut for the building of the Beis HaMikdash and the various vessels and kelim. Batal HaShamir. So when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, the Shamir was batal, was nullified. V'noifes tzufim, as well as a certain kind of honey that came from this place of tzufim. Va'amana, as well as faithful people of faith. These three things were nisbatal, or nullified when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And over here we have a bit of a rare case where Rebbe Nachman puts together the agada of one of the Sabid Be'atuna or some other agada that he's using as the primary source, together with another agada from a Mishnah in Saita, and we're going to use these two to explain the revelation as it unfolds. B'siyata d'shmaya. It says Rebbe Nachman, Schus Yagon Aleinu Eis Aleph. Ki tzarech kol adam lahoitzias atzmei mehamedameh. Says the Rebbe, our primary mission in the world is to remove ourselves from the Medameh. Now, Medameh is an interesting word. Usually it comes together with the word Koach that comes before it, Koach HaMedameh, which means the force of delusion. Right? Medameh is like dimion, it's an imagination. Koach HaMedameh. We're going to see at the very end of the lesson that Rebbe Nachman actually renames the Yetzer Hara, and he says that from this time we should no longer call it the Yetzer Hara, we should call it the Koach HaMedameh, which is very, very deep. Rebbe Nachman's going to say he didn't fully understand the implication of what Rebbe Nachman meant, but we're going to try to discuss in the unfolding of the Shir what's the distinction between Yetzer Hara, those two words, Yetzer, inclination toward Hara, toward evil, and Koach HaMedameh, right? Because we need to contrast both of those phrases, right? Koach and Yetzer, and Medameh and Ra, which we'll do in time. But over here, Rebbe Nachman introduces the power of Medameh, the koach of imagination or delusion, by contrasting it with Seichel, and using the word la'alot to describe the transference from one to the other. So Rebbe Nachman says you have to remove yourself from the Medameh, v'la'alois, and to ascend el ha-Seichel, to climb out of a delusional way of looking at the world, which in the context here is rooted in a lower part of the human being, because the word la'alot is used to be able to ascend and to access seichel, intellect. And there is a contrast between the seichel and this inyan of Medameh. Because the Rebbe says, "Kishenimshach achar Medameh," when a person is drawn after the Medameh, we're still trying to seek a definition of what Rebbe Nachman means when he says this. So the Rebbe connects Medameh to Zebechinas Shrirus Lev, This is the aspect of shriras Lev. This comes from a pasuk where a person says, I will walk after shriras Lev. Rashi over there says that the word shriras is connected to the word shur. Like it says, Ale Shur, right? Where Rashi says over there, by Yosef Tzaddik, the woman would climb up on the wall to see. He was so beautiful and handsome, right? That they would climb up Ale Shur on the wall to see. Shur means to see. We learned this also in Torah Aleph, all the way back in the beginning. The Rebbe used this as a remez of the word Ashrei. Ashrei Tmimei Darach. The Rebbe said over there, Ashrei means a lashon estaklis. Tmimei Darach, right? People who see the Seichel and everything. Tmimei, right? Are connected to Ya'akov Avinu, and that's the inyan of Darach. That was some references in Torah Aleph. So Rashi tells us on the word shriras libi elech that shriras is a connection to the word shur, to the connection to eyesight. And shriras Lev means that instead of a person's Seichel seeing the world, instead a person's Lev is seeing the world. And seeing, obviously, is connected to the Gemara. It describes the leaders of the generation as the Einei Ha'eda, right? Because like a person who's blind is following somebody who could see. So the one who sees is leading. Otherwise, it's precarious. It's dangerous, right? To follow if somebody's blind, it's like it'll lead you off a cliff, right? But if somebody has sight, so then they're in a leadership position. The question is, what part of us is feeling out the world in order to enable us to make decisions necessary to move from one place to another? And the two choices, the two options are, it's either Seichel, that's what the Rebbe is saying, which is an elevated way of looking at the world, where a person's Seichel is in the driver's seat, kiviyachal. The other option is where a person is seeing out of their Lev. That's shriras Lev. Shu haLech, and that's the Rebbe uses this definition of Rashi. What does shriras Lev mean? Shriras Lev means that if the part of me that's looking out into the world to be able to see what the right way is to go, the choices to make, the decisions that are ahead of me, if that is my Lev, so then Shu haLech, if those are the Einei Ha internal Eidah, so to speak, if that is what's leading me, so then Shu haLech achar Medameh shebalev. Then I'm naturally going to be following over, and here the Rebbe introduces the other element of the Lev, achar Medameh shebalev, where a person is following their heart. And over here we have a very clear contrast between the heart and the mind. Right? These two headquarters of human functionality. The heart is generally seen as a collective for the emotions, and the mind is seen as a collective for intellect. Rooted in the clarity of the Seichel is then supposed to be brought down into the heart, and then a person is supposed to proceed with both mind and heart, with their intellect and their emotion. But a very mighty principle of all of Yiddishkeit, really, and this is very clear in the Tanya, where the Baal Tanya uses this short phrase where he says, Moach shalit ala Lev. In its teva, as a result of it being higher up in the human physiology, every higher part of the body is supposed to be manhig, the lower part. The Sifrei Kadmonim already discussed at a very basic level that this is similar to a person riding on a donkey. The person who's higher, is it right, or the entity here, the person who's riding is supposed to be the one who's Moishel. In this sense, the person who's riding the horse is like the Seichel. And the horse, and this is very precise because we're going to be learning about the inyan of Bahamius, of the animalistic element within the human being, which we're going to discuss in a minute, is supposed to be the element that's being guided, that's being led. Seichel and Medameh, brain and heart. And Moach shalit ala Lev. So the Lev is a very important component of Yiddishkeit. The Lev is a very important component of life. A person's supposed to have emotions. A person's supposed to have feelings. A person's supposed to... That's what makes us human. Hashem wants us that we should have those elements, those tendencies within us. But the ideal is that they should be guided by the mind. And that if a person asks, what's supposed to be leading? I should be holech achar ma. What should I be following after? The Rebbe says... the goal of life, really the goal of life, and this is microcosmically encapsulated in Elul. Obviously, this is what we're supposed to do during this month, is to try to realign ourselves with what our ideal nature is supposed to be, is this. is that a person should get out of the Medameh, and a person should be la'alos el Seichel, to climb out from underneath the heart that otherwise is guiding, and that a person should not walk after shrirus Lev, shrirus Lev. They should climb up to the Seichel. We could use the terminology, I'm sure, that I mentioned in a previous year. The difference between responsive and reactive. This is a very practical way to be able to tell whether a person is in their mind or in their heart. Because the heart is reactive. It's like a knee-jerk, like we say, reaction, like cats are very quick on their feet. Right away, it's just knee-jerk. It's called knee-jerk because the doctors, I think, used to use this little hammer thing on your knee, right, to test your reflexes. It's reflexive. It's reactive. This is behema. Behema is what are you pre-programmed to do without creating a pause between stimulus and the effect. That's behemas. There's no thought, right? Famously, I think it's a story going back to the Rambam, I believe, where he was asserting, right, that animals are animals, and they don't have the capacity to insert that pause and to make this calculated decision and to respond as opposed to react. And they told him, no, animals could be trained, and they trained a whole group of cats, right? I think to become waiters or something like that, right? To come in and to carry this, a platter full of food, and in come the cats, and they're all walking on two legs, and they're carrying the platters, and the Rambam's it's very impressive. It's incredible, like the mamish look like people. And then the Rambam takes out of his pocket a mouse, and he lets the mouse loose. Food everywhere, platters all over the floor, and the cats are gone, right? And the Rambam is telling them, you don't understand, you can train, but a behema is a behema is a behema. They don't have that ability to calculate in this way so that they get out of reactivity and they respond instead. This is something uniquely human. This is something uniquely human. I want to take us out of just this very simple presentation of what it means to make a distinction between responsive and reactive, all the way into the theological domain of the difference between polytheism and monotheism, because it's connected. If you think about it, polytheism before Avram Avinu, right, tribal gods, was an incredibly circular existence. Means the human being perceived him or herself to be caught under the domain of forces that were presumably completely beyond their control, and the entire aim of polytheistic worship was to appease these forces whose lives we were stuck under the dominion of the rain, lowercase g god, right, and the sun god and the wind god and so on and so forth. And life was incredibly static. This is what life was. These are the forces acting upon you. You have no fundamental volition in your life. You're stuck under these forces, and like the circle of life, the wheel goes round and round, and it doesn't stop. Or if you take it to the east, you're stuck in sort of like karmic, cycles. Even though it's a much more complicated system, but something akin to that, where a person is you're just stuck in a cycle that is being guided by forces that are completely beyond your control. People don't think about it so much in this way because we don't learn Tanakh in this way, generally in the yeshivas, but if you think about it in a historical context, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the monotheistic God who created human beings in his image, which means, according to the Nefesh HaChaim and many of the tzaddikim, going back to Rabbeinu Bechai already, that we are powerful beings. That's what it means. We're created b'tselem Elokim. We have all the powers of the universe inside of ourselves, and although it might look like we're puppets on the bottom being pulled by strings from above, lehepech, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in such a way that the puppets control the strings and not the opposite, and that us, by making actions and moving down here, predominantly by using our bechira, which we're going to talk about in a minute, to make positive choices and to get out of the medameh of reactivity and to get into the responsiveness of what it means to actually be a human and not a behema, we're impacting all the strings. The first thing this monotheistic God says to any human in a religious way is Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha And there's so many meanings, right? What it means for each of us as spiritual seekers, that a person has to go out of their comfort zone. A person has to break out of what they're used to. But on a much more existential level, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, I'm different than all of the tribal gods, that you have around you in Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. Hashem says, I am a God who is encouraging you to break cycles. I am a God who is telling you, Lech Lecha. Be the first human among humans who see themselves as nothing more than animals. Break from the cycle. Everybody else is going in circles. You go straight. Go on a one-way ticket. Lech Lecha me'aretz me'ladecha me'beis avicha ela aretz asher areka. Not as a visit, a pilgrimage, and then come back. Don't. Leave. This is monotheistic. Only the monotheistic God, who contains within himself all place, can move a person from one place to another place, can bring the person outside of their own small, constricted circle of behavior, which is impacted by a person's own small, constricted way of thinking, which goes back to Torah Chof Aleph and Chof Beis, where we spoke about rising from Pnim to Makif to Pnim to Makif, and a person's supposed to travel. We didn't learn about a return journey. We learned that before every next level, there's going to be an obstacle. We learned very deeply about that in Torah Chof Beis. We're going to learn about that again now in Torah Chof Hey. But a person's supposed to go. I think this very deeply perhaps is one of the symbols of what it means to travel from the Korban Omer, which we bring right after getting out of Mitzrayim, to the Shtei HaLechem of Shabbos, where all the Svarim, especially Likutei makes a very big deal about what it means to go from Machal Behema, which is the Korban Omer, barley is a very lowly kind of food, to the Shtei HaLechem, which only human beings have figured out how to take something from its raw state, reactivity, and to turn it into something else with the Seichel that enables a person to develop something, which, by the way, excuse the pun, baked in, right, to that whole inyan is the concept of patience. The concept of being able to forego immediate pleasure, which is the barley in its raw form, where you can figure out how to eat it, and if you can't eat it, you leave it, and you find something else to eat immediately, and to figure out what it means to take something from its raw form and to help it to develop into something else. This is the development of bread. This is Meleches HaPas. Okay, I'm not going to get into Shabbos now. Shabbos is even deeper, because Shabbos is the holy reactivity. So Shabbos, there's no inyan of Melacha. There's no Meleches HaPas. Right? Not because on Shabbos we're like animals, but on Shabbos we're so in tune with the neshama yesera of the holy reactive nature of what it means to be a Jewish person, what it means to be part of the nation that's im loy neviim heim b'nei neviim heim, which means, like the Gemara Pesachim tells us, Hillel saw that there are halachas of Pesach that may have been forgotten by the Talmidei Chachamim, but if you watch the people, they have a holy impulse, right? There's a holy reactivity within Klal Yisrael. Shabbos is where we return to our essence, and so it's weiter no Meleches HaPas, but not because we're more animalistic, but because we are reactive in a holy sense. It's like Pinchas. It's the reactivity of the kanes kinasi. It's just you don't think. Sometimes eis lasus lashem hefer tarasecha. There's also an inyan like that. This is very deep, because there are sources within the writings of the Baal Tanya, even though if you only learn Tanya from the Baal Tanya, so you have a little bit of a misconstrued understanding of the whole over of the Baal Tanya. Sometimes, Lubavitchers, we could expect that they would learn more widely, but sometimes all people learn from the Tanya is Tanya. And I believe it's a mistake, because the Baal Tanya wrote much, much, much more than Tanya. Tanya is a tiny book. It's 53 short chapters. Some are longer than others, but relatively, right? It's big letters and it's short. It's a very accessible, short book. Famously, the Rebbe Zusha, when he saw the Tanya, said, "How did you manage to fit such a gross God, such a big God, into such a little book?" Because mamish, you encounter Hashem in the Tanya. Yes, because he deliberated over every single letter and every word, but he tried to make it as compact as possible. And then, most people don't know this, the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, has thousands of pages of other writings of the same nature in Chassidus think it's thousands of pages, certainly hundreds of pages, between Torah R and Likutei Torah, which are all of his drashas on the Parsha, on the Mayadim, thick books with teeny letters. If you do the math, like I don't know what percentage of the total Hasidic writings of the Baal Tanya is Tanya. So I'm sure you could do that online today. You can ask, one of these AIs or whatever to figure this out. It's a teeny percentage. Klape what the Baal Tanya wrote elsewhere. And sometimes when you see Tanya in the context of the other writings of the Baal Tanya, many of which are incredibly deep and difficult and really go on for pages and pages and pages of huge drushes, but you get a little bit of a contextualization of the writings in Tanya. So for example, in Tanya, the Baal Tanya, based on that, what we just said, Moach shalit haLev, that the mind is the most important thing. But there are two sources that I could remember in the other writings of the Baal Tanya, but leave it to Likutei Torah, but I have to look at home, where he writes that really the Penimiyus Lev is higher than the Moach. So yes, it's true that there is a madrega generally where the Moach is shalit ala Lev, nachon, but it's also true that Penimiyus Lev is weiter higher than the brain. Huh?
2 weeks ago to Yadavtim Lech Lecha, very specific expression. You knowing with a heart, it's a much.
That's right. Heart is also connected to Moach. Sometimes the heart is used as the seat of the mind, which is very, very deep, right? And I think that it fills out a more accurate understanding of emotion. Whereas sometimes in Chabad you'll have like the denigration of emotion because they're Chabad and everybody else Chagas and they're higher and this, But in the Baal Tanya itself, it says that sometimes the heart could be even rooted higher. So it's both, and I think that that's the inyan of Shabbos, getting out of Meleches HaPas primarily, right? But not primarily, but that's right of the Lamates Melachos, is to or that segment of the Lamates Melachos is to realize that we also have a holy reactivity that's rooted in the Penimiyus of the Lev. But our job as Yidden, I would say, to allow that holy reactivity to surface is to the degree that we're moving out of the Medameh, which is the inyan of Behema, the inyan of the Korban Omer, to be able to get out and to be able to access the Shtei HaLechem. This is the Lech Lecha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Avram Avinu. And it's just echoed in his descendants who go down to Egypt where they're stuck, where they're enslaved, and they're about to achieve freedom. And freedom means get out of cycles. That is what freedom means. Freedom means you are not stuck in whatever cycle of behavior, whatever cycle of thinking, whatever cycle of relationship dynamic. You're not stuck. That is the ultimate message of monotheism. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I created you in my image, which some of the Rishonim learn means Bechira. Some of the Rishonim learns, like the Rebbe Nachman that I quoted earlier, that the Nefesh HaChaim quotes and builds his whole thesis on in Shar Aleph, the human being is the collective of all the different spiritual energies in the whole entire world. And Hashem says, I really put the Bria into your own hands. Now, no singular human is gonna change. Can you imagine if all the geopolitical events, can you imagine if your newsfeed on your phone echoed your own personal behavior, right? So we don't experience life that way. I'm sure on some level, the impulses of the impacts of each of our choices is somehow adding to the algorithm. But it is certainly true about the universe of our own lives. It's completely and entirely in our hands. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Hakol bidei Shamayim chutz mi Yireh Shamayim. Hashem gave that into our hands, and Yireh Shamayim is the Pesach to everything else. Yireh is the Bechin of Zois. Zois Yavei Aaron ala Kodesh. Once you have that, Reishis Chachma Yireh Hashem. Okay, you have Yireh Hashem, you have Chachma. Chachma, you have access to everything. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, right now everything is in my hands, but what's in your hands is Yireh Shamayim. And if you utilize your own access point to Yireh Shamayim, the sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. This is the message of Yiddishkeit. People don't realize this. People sometimes think that Yiddishkeit is about feeling controlled. A person just do what you're told. It's the opposite. Al tikre charis ala luchas, ella cheirus ala luchas. Chazal darshan, ein ben chayrin ela misha isek b'Torah. Torah is supposed to be freeing. But in order to understand the freeing nature of Torah, we have to understand what servitude means. And we have to swap out our more Western conception of freedom being that I can do whatever I want, right? Limited to the I that usually is a Bahamiistic, like the Medameh of I, which then wants all moral and ethical and spiritual and religious restrictions to dissolve so that the I can do whatever it wants in the delusion that will give us what we're looking for. That's the delusion, by the way, which we're going to get into. That's the delusion. It's a delusion. It's not, and I think, okay, I may as well, once we're here, because I'm just providing the sort of backdrop for the Torah, and then we'll get into it. I mentioned before the contrast between Yetzer Hara and Koach HaMedameh. One of the things that you'll notice is that the judgment is taken out of that expression. Yetzer Hara has a dual implication. Yetzer means, how do you translate Yetzer?
Form.
Huh?
Form.
Yes, it's connected to the word of Yetzirah, but within a person, how do we usually refer to it? Urge, inclination, but the implication of inclination is that it's yours, right? It's you. It's an inclination within you to evil. Yetzer Hara, right? And the reason why it's Yetzer is because it forms. Rebbe Nachman's going to speak about that at Torah Test, I believe, other lessons. It's something in you. Koach is something else. Koach, right, speaks about an objective force. We don't speak about it in its embodied impersonization, it just is. It's a koach. Raz, evil. It's the evil inclination. Every person is a part of them that's evil. Rebbe Nachman says you got to rename the Yetzer Hara. It's not a Yetzer Hara. It's a Koach HaMedameh. This is next level Jewish theology. This is a modernized understanding which developed beautifully in tandem, really, even though it's not really in tandem because it came first, of the psychological revolution that I think we've spoken about many times in our lessons, where the judgment is taken out of looking at a person's actions, and in line with the human being more and more steadily more conscious of the Penimiyus, is able to look beyond the surface and to be able to ask that all-important question, not what's going on, but what's
Why is it going
really going on, right? Or why is it going on? What's really going on? What? Not what's this person doing? What is this person looking for that's causing them to do what they're doing? It's not an Indian of doing. And I think that this is the question that psychology asks, to double-click, so to speak, on the behaviors and to use them as portals to be able to have a very deep understanding of the person, because the actions are only the external indicators as to a whole inner world. And this is an incredibly deep way of looking at the world, and it's an incredibly religious way of looking at the world. Because the religious person looks at current events, let's say, and doesn't say what's going on, they say what's really going on. What message is the Kadosh Baruch Hu sending us? Person goes to nature. We were privileged enough to be in Banff in Alberta in Canada over the break, my wife and I, and you look at nature, and I was just saying to my wife, like, what a privilege that among however many thousands of people happen to be at this particular lake or this particular glacier or mountains, whatever, how many people are sitting here in religious awe, feeling not overwhelmed simply by the beauty of the nature, but of the presence of God. And I told my wife, imagine one day it's going to be the case that every person who visits, we'll have crowds of people, might not be the same religion, but will all be of this mindset. That will be the knee-jerk thing. What do you feel when you look around? It's not just like, wow, beautiful nature. You feel overwhelmed with awe. Because you recognize that although on the surface it's a natural world, it's Mamish Hashem. It's Hashem's manifesting His Tiferes, His beauty. So Rebbe Nachman is taking us out of a prior phase of Jewish theology, which is basically everything up till him, Kimat, even though the Baal Shem Tov began to do this work, and the Arizal began to do the work, and Rashbi began to do, but it didn't develop to such a point where any of the tzaddikim renamed the Yetzer Hara. They were still operating under that paradigm. Rebbe Nachman in this Torah says we have to change everything. It's not a Yetzer Hara. It's not the evil part within you. Or now Rebbe Nachman says we're renaming it. Renaming it, we're going to see at the end. At the very end of this Torah, we're going to get there, we'll read it inside. Renaming the Yetzer Hara. It is now called Koach HaMedameh. It is the force that all of us grapple with, that was originally embodied in a entity that was completely outside of us. We've discussed this in the past. That's called the Nachash HaKadmoni, right? That was totally separate from us. That part of the Chet Eitz Hadas, says this in Nefesh HaChaim, I'm repeating myself as I've said this in previous year, but just to Chazara, was the Eitz Hadas Toivera. That Das could mean knowledge of, but it could also mean intimacy, like V'yeda Adam Eschave Ishtoi. And Das Toivera meant that the Nachash that was prior, totally external to the person now fell into the delusion, the dimion, that now the Yetzer Hara is part of me. You understand? Part of living in the Medameh is thinking that the Yetzer Hara is yours. Renaming the Yetzer Hara Koach HaMedameh is already one step out of the Medameh. Because the greatest dimion in the world, rooted in the Eitz Hadas Toivera, is to think that the Nachash is me, that I am the Nachash. That there's some part of me that actually wants that. That's the Medameh. Right, meaning that's the Bahamius of thinking that I want this, right? We've spoken about that, right, many times now, right? To think, I want this. Freedom, I want to be free. So I have to be able to cast off all of the different considerations that will allow me to act literally like a behemoth and to respond to stimulus in no different a way than a cow responds when you put in front of him, whatever the cows eat, grass, hay, whatever it is. No different. There's no difference. Person sitting at a dinner, whatever it is, and they bring out the steaks, and there's no difference. By many people, maybe by myself, maybe by ourselves, much of the time, there's no chiluk between the person's orientation toward the food that's put in front of them and an ox and a donkey, reacts when food is put in front of them. That's freedom, kivyachol. It's dimion, total dimion. Not because it's not a thing that you should be doing, it's bad, and how dare you, and you should overcome your Yetzer Hara. It's much deeper than that. It's not a Yetzer Hara. It's not you have this evil inclination. Get over it. The Rebbe says no. It's much deeper. You don't even want that. It's the Koach HaMedameh. It's not Ra. It's dimion. What's the dimion? Twofold. Number one, I am that, right? So that is part of me, not just part of me, like integrated into me. It is a part of me, and that leads to dimion number two, right? Meaning because it's a very short logical step from that to thinking, well, if that's a part of me, and there's a part of me that wants that, so then I want that, and the Rebbe says you need to totally separate the two. That is not you. You are not that. What it wants is different from what you want, and therefore its definition of freedom is absolutely and entirely antithetical to your own true concept of freedom. That's called climbing out of the Medameh and climbing into Seichel. That's called being an Avram Avinu person. Lech Lecha. Get out of your cycles. You don't need to be stuck. You're not stuck because you were never stuck, because it's not you, Bichlal. This is Elul. It really is. Elul is all about realizing that what was yesterday is not relevant today. Uru Yeshenim Mishinaschem. It's the blowing of the shofar that we blow the whole month of Elul. The Rambam says a gewaldic thing. A person sleeps the whole entire year. B'havle hazman is the lashon of the Rambam. A person slumbers the whole year, and comes Elul, and the shofar is not. The Rambam, the shofar is not giving musar. The shofar is not. It's not yelling at us. It's not. Look what you've become. How did you waste so much time? That's not the sound of the shofar at all. That's not what a person should be hearing when they hear the shofar. The shofar is not coming. It's not yelling. The shofar says, "Listen, guys, whatever you've done in all of your slumbering for however many weeks or months or it could even be years. The shofar says it is not relevant. That's what the shofar says. The shofar says, wake up. Meaning to say, that wasn't you. That wasn't you. It's true, Amud la'olam, even when a person sleeps, whatever. But it's not even you. You were sleeping. Ani yeshena b'libi er. The Penimiyus of the Lev, right? Like the Balatanya, like we said. That point of Jewish reactivity. The holy, holy essence of what it means to be a chelek or lekamimal. It's very simple. Wake up. There's no judgment there, you understand? Elul comes with so much judgment and guilt. There's no guilt and judgment. There's nothing. It's just a very pure call to the deepest part of you. That says, Uru Yeshenim Mishinaschem. Yeshenim, I haven't been sleeping. Says the Rambam, you don't realize, but the way you've been acting is coming out of your unconsciousness. It's been coming out of the Medameh. That's not you. Says the Rebbe, wake up. So we did one line, but we did a lot already. But go back to the beginning. Every person needs to lift themselves out of the Medameh and to rise up into the true reality, to true ways of seeing myself, true ways of understanding what I want, true ways of figuring out what it is that I want and how to get it. And that's called Seichel. When a person is not living out of their Seichel, when a person is nimshach, is drawn after the Medameh, which is a very, very, very powerful gravitational pull. A person is caught in between these two impulses. In previous shiurim, we've set this up as nefesh, ruach, neshama, right? Where the ruach is essentially where the person is, and they're either drawn up to the neshama or they're drawn down to the nefesh. Zeh b'china shirur slave, shu haLev achar Medameh shebalev. There's a Medameh there. So says the Rebbe, u'ksheyotzim mishriras haLev. When a person is able to get out of shriras lev, u'mishaber liboya even, and is able to break their heart of stone, which is a bechina of getting out of the Medameh, which the Rebbe says is a heart of stone, because a stone is impenetrable. A stone doesn't lend itself to comprehension. It's closed up. It's mitumtam.
Not flexible.
It's not right. It's not flexible. It's not malleable. It's not changeable. Beautiful. It's stuck. That's right.
Probably just smashing the idols.
Beautiful. Smashing stone. Right? And it sinks all the way to the bottom with all different ramazim, excellent, of an even. When a person gets out of the Medameh, they're mishaber lev ha'even. Sabachina shamir. Says the Rebbe, this is what it means, the shamir worm. The shamir is this, it was a historical worm and they used it to cut the stones. It's true. What's the avoida of shamir? That's what Hasidus means. You can learn all these concepts, it doesn't mean anything to you. It's an interesting historical oddity. What does it do for me though? What does it mean, shamir? Says the Rebbe, this is the force that is finally able to tunnel into Lev ha'even and to break it in two. Sha'al yadai nichna ha'even. That through the shamir, nichna ha'even, the even is subjugated. And the person no longer goes after taivas hamedumias. And again, I want to make it very clear, the Rebbe is not speaking about, it says like taivas ra'os, taivas, megunais, disgusting or bad or evil. It says the Rebbe, let's get out of judgment. There's no reason to judge, because it's so much deeper than that. Let's just say very simply, taiva medumias. It's Medameh. It's not bad or good. It's just it's a delusional desire. And a person begins, they wake up, and they hear the shofar, they wake up, and they start to follow the Seichel. Now, to those who I think were with us probably from the beginning, we mentioned these words, Lev ha'even, in the context of understanding what it means, Breslev. Right? What does it mean, Breslev? Rebbe Nachman is teaching his Hasidim in a town, in a city in Ukraine called Breslev, and he said, my Hasidim will always be called Breslever Hasidim, even though he had lived most of his life in other places, Latipolia and other places in Ukraine, he said Breslov will be the name of the Hasidus. And not only that, but he said La'asid Lavai, before the coming of Mashiach, that the ganze Welt sein Breslover Hasidim. The whole humanity will be Breslover Hasidim. So what does that mean? 2 lines later, the Rebbe explains. He says, you know what it is that we're trying to accomplish in Breslov? Which, because Breslover Hasidim don't see the Rebbe like other Hasidus and saw their Rebbe, like, this is the Rebbe for Spink, and this is the Rebbe for bells, and this is... in Breslov and Chabad is a two, and ultimately the Baal Shem Tov himself with his Hasidim, they saw their Rebbe as being the Rebbe of the whole world. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe wasn't a Rebbe for Lubavitcher Hasidim. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was the Rebbe of the whole humanity, right? And the Breslover see Rebbe Nachman the same way. It's not our Rebbe. We are Breslover Hasidim, and it's okay for you to follow him. And there's a new Geulah in the world. It's like everybody needs this. It's not okay. But it says there, what are we trying to accomplish? The Rebbe points us to a pasuk in Yeshayahu. And the pasuk in Yeshayahu says, "V'hasiroisi lechem lev ha'even," I will remove your heart of stone, and what will I give you in its place? Lev Basar. Says the Rebbe, Lev Basar is the letters Breslov. Lev Basar. This is the whole effort of the whole pele of a sefer that's called Likutei Moharan. I was just reading yesterday, I posted to my status, quite a radical thing, but the Rebbe said, sell every other sefer you have, buy a Likutei Moharan. He says, sell the pillow under your head, buy a Likutei Moharan. Everything you need, everything you need, everything you need. The whole goal of this tzaddik and of his teachings is that we should get out of Lev ha'even and we should be able to access Lev Basar. Now, there are many meanings of this pasuk. You could take a look at the Mefarshim, but I want to look at Rashi. Rashi comments on those words Lev ha'even, and Rashi understands Lev ha'even as a reference to Gaiva. Lev ha'even, because it can mean many things. It can mean an insensitive heart. Right, that's what it would seem to mean, right? Because Lev Basar means compassionate feeling, soft. Rashi learns Lev ha'even is ego. It's heavy, not something that floats. It has weight. It has gravitas. It is Lev ha'even, and that's why I think if you look back inside here, when the Rebbe is talking about the Shamir. Sha'al Yadai, listen to the words he used, Nichna ha'even. How do you counteract the Evan? First, I have to understand what Evan is. Evan is the ego, right? Is the person who's rooted in their own sense of self, which, taken to its logical extremity, is rooted in the person's body, because that's what the person's self is, right? That's what demarcates us from everything else, right? Is the body with all of what it wants and needs. The Rebbe uses the word nichna. Nichna ha'even. For the Evan to be subjugated. That's a counteraction of Gaiva, is to bring a person into the humility of the Lev Basar. It's probably connected to Torah Vav, and I think some previous lessons that we learned, Torah Vav obviously being the Elul teaching, and so it's very kedai if the Chaver will chazer Torah Vav, even just to read it through, get reacquainted with some of the things, or even in the Stream of Consciousness document, just to look it over again. Torah Vav is the teaching on Elul. But over there, and in other lessons also, we learned this paradoxical, counterintuitive movement, where the more that a person is running after their own gaiva, the more it runs away from them. There's a deep absurdity there. There's a deep dimion there. Right? What a strange thing. The more a person tries to get something, the less of it they can get. And the more that they try, literally the less they can get. And when they try to the utmost, that's the least they can possibly get of it. It's bizarre. That's not the way of the world. It's dimion. Total dimion. This is the root for all the taivas that are rooted in that fundamental desire to be mechabed the guf, behema, lower chelik of the person. And so kavod is just a more refined form of the aggrandizement, right, of a person's own sense of self. Taiva is another form of that. There's kavod in taiva. Of course there's kavod in taiva. What is taiva? Taiva means that I feel an impulse and I deserve to eat, to see, to look, to hear, to experience, fill in that blank. There's a deep there's a sense of deserving there. And there's a sense of who are you to tell me that I can't have, I want. And if I want, it's absolute. This is the locus of the universe. If this is what is happening inside, this is a lack that must be filled now by me, right? This minute of my own volition. There's a deep cover there. There's a deep sense of humility and bittul to be able to respect a boundary that was set by someone else. Deep, deep sense of humility. If that boundary was set by a human, presumably we could understand why the boundary was set. And so even the greatest, let's say, rule breaker, I've not seen necessarily the people who are, were very, very troublesome as children, troublemakers, or even developed as adults or rebellious teenagers who are driving down the street feel the need to go through every red light that they see. I've not, society would collapse, right? Meaning everybody understands you have to stop at a red light. Why? Because it's a rule that you understand. Hayasa was set by someone else. It requires a level of bittul because mechatesi. Mechatesi, is that what do you mean? You value your life. There's no more covet-oriented thing you could do than stop at a red light because it's self-preserving. To respect the boundary set by someone else that you cannot immediately experience the benefit of, or alternatively, doesn't even seem to have any benefit, or alternatively, seems to do nothing but harm. So a person feels this is destroying, this is takes an inordinate amount of bittul. And this is the purpose of the whole Torah, especially the chukim umishpatim. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us a Torah and says, what I'm trying to help you access is a Lev Basar. Lev Basar means it's not what's best for you. It's the counterintuitive realization that actually the more that you can overcome this concept of living for what's best for you, the better it will be for you. Pella. Because the more a person runs away from kavod, the more that they'll get it. This is the pella of the Torah. We've discussed this in previous lessons. Ezu asher lechalke, ezu gibar kavod shesitzar. Chazal are counterintuitive. It's the opposite of what you'd think. And Chazal say yes, because the logic of the Torah Kedosha is coming from a place of counterintuitivity, I think is the word. It's coming from a place of olam hafach re'isi, where everything is the opposite of the way that it looks. And maybe this is pshat in the Penimiyus of the Moach being the Lev. Because on an externalized level, Lev is here, Moach is here. Because you have, let's say, right, the seeking of kavod from the standpoint of the Koach HaMedameh, Bahamius, that's the Lev, that's reactivity, not responsiveness, whatever, that's there. Then you have Moach. And what we're suggesting is there's this strange counterintuitive movement that once a person rises up to the Seichel, out of the Medameh, what you then access is kavod. Right? I mean, what you then access is the thing that you were running away from down here. You get it up there, but when you get it up there, it's not you that's getting the kavod. It's the chelik kamimal inside of you, and second, that's getting the kavod. And in that place, you are not you. In that place, you are him. And in that place, Ritzaneinu la'ases ritzanecha. Our Ratzon and Kadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon align. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us that we should be able, this El, to climb out of the Medameh, to be able to access Seichel. We're just opening up to our Chof. There's a lot to get to, just starting, but what a privilege to be back with all of you. Thank you so much for joining, and I can't wait for this journey together this year. Thank you so much for joining.
Amazing. Koach. Lower the expectation and the happiness.
אני הבן ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני